Thanks, Dorina. It's a great opportunity to be able to give a presentation at the NAS conference, so thank you very much to our host for providing the opportunity. I decided to open up this paper, given the nature of the conference or topic we're looking at, looking at weather patterns and human activity in terms of incidences of discovery of the dugout boats, through time, to see if there's any sort of emergent sort of patterns that we can actually learn from and be able to predict from. So, part of this process is also looking at sort of annual sort of cycles. There is approximately 500 dugout boats that have been recorded from the island of Ireland. Now, this is a rough estimate. I have data on 439 of these boats. So in conversation there yesterday with Carl Brady from the Underwater Archaeology Unit of the National Monument Services, we're looking forward to being able to sort of collaborate and merge our data and be able to sort of make up on this sort of deficit. But in terms of the actual sort of hard sort of data, while we don't actually have the full number of boats, the full process of the records, having 440 odd boats, I think, might be considered to be able to give sort of a good sort of guide in terms of emergent sort of patterns that we may have on discoveries of the boats. However, over time there have been very sort of wide-ranging circumstances of the records, in terms of some of them may have been recorded as a boat was found, or that there were several boats, right the way through to some very sort of detailed records. So there can be huge variety and wide-ranging variance in terms of the actual sort of data that we're working off. Also, we have an amount of misclassification of boats through time. There has been a tendency in the Republic of Ireland for troughs made from hollowed out tree trunks as being misclassed as reused dugout boats, and these troughs often turn up more recently in road schemes where we have burnt spreads or ancient sort of cooking sites in which the troughs are used to hold water and boil the meat or have saunas and so on. In Northern Ireland, there is also tendency for chutes for horizontal wheel mills to actually be misclassified as dugout boats. But the one common denominator between them all is that they're shaped tree trunks and hollowed out interiors. Quite often, this misclassification is a consequence of archaeologists not being appropriately sort of trained in terms of how to understand recording of these dugout boats. Certainly in my time as a student in UCD, boat archaeology, maritime, nautical archaeology, none of it featured on the curriculum, and I've no doubt that has actually changed to some extent, improved in more recent sort of years. But at that sort of time, anyway, I'd sneak off to the library and look up copies of the IJNA and happily read that. But it's also helpful that it was also on the way to the student bar. So in terms of the years of discovery, we've got 391 boats that we know the years of discovery. You see the graph over on the left. That right this way, that we've got one recorded there in the late 1700s. We tend to have a sort of a pickup then coming in into the 1820s, 1830s, into the 1850s, drop off, and then again coming into the 20th century, coming from the 1930s through to the 1990s. I'll be able to explain a little bit more about the circumstances of those, but an amount of that is based on actual human activity. So in terms of the actual months, we only have 86 boats in which we know the months have been recorded. And again, this process of being able to collate the data, all data, as much as we can get, is just really important, really, really relevant. So we've got a drop off in terms of data that we can actually sort of interpret. So it starts to erode our interpretive sort of abilities in terms of any sort of predictive modelling that we may be able to make as regards to human activity or climate change. But of note, there is February to April sort of period, and again we're looking at June through to November. Now on the face of it, we can actually sort of say that an amount of these are caused by weather patterns. that going from November through into February and March, we can actually have periods of flood incidences that can actually bring up, wash up boats, from rivers during these sort of, seasonal sort of flood events. I presume the colder months of January, February seem to have less instances of floods, but perhaps Met Éireann might be able to correct me on that one. I'm sure they've done far more analysis than I have and got better tools than I'll ever have. June to September period definitely is the drier sort of periods traditionally. Particularly sort of July and August, we get sort of significant sort of drop-offs in water levels in the lakes. So these are partially responsible for these notable sort of increases in incidence of times a year of boat discoveries. So we've got the events, activities which led to them. We can break it down a little bit in terms of the records that we do have. So we've got 85 of them were from natural weather events, be they actually drought sort of periods or flooding. The photograph on the left here, this is the River Clady in 2015, November 2015. It's on the border between Donegal and Tyrone in the northwest of the country. It was a very significant sort of rain event that led to the river bursting its banks, and just 2 kilometres north of there it threw up the remains of 8 dugout boats. Niall Gregory mentioned there on his paper there yesterday about terms of using rock armour and using the geotextile beneath it and the microplastics that actually into the water supply. But equally, you can see actually we have it here. We've got some sort of pollutant sort of doing a runoff from this farm building here. So it's actually happening internally within our country, not just in the coastal regions as well. As regards to our record, it tends to show that human activity seems to be the greater sort of incidences at which we actually find the boats. Incidents such as dredging, not this particular one, I think that was in the early noughties at Poolbeg Power Station. It didn't turn up any archaeology, but dredging activity has actually turned up quite a number of them. So just to give very brief context on the boats, we've got 85 of them found from natural events, 36 of them from seasonally low waters, and we've got another 18 that are in seasons that are coincidental with low water activities. The data that we have didn't specifically say that it was a low water event, but it seemed to infer that this was actually happening at that time, which led to this sort of discovery. Similarly, flooding, there's 29 of them, and there's only one that seemed to be from a season that was coincident with the discovery. One event at bog slip, because quite an amount of these boats have turned up during turf cutting activities in the past, especially in the Midlands. If you consider for our benefit for our visitors from across the puddle, we have a lot of bog environment within the centre of Ireland that would have formed former sort of lakes, and there were lake drainage activities in the 18th and 19th centuries of small lakes to be able to reclaim them. So that drainage could have led to these discoveries also through turf cutting. But this one bog slip there now doesn't say whether it was a man-made event or a natural sort of occurrence. With human activity, we have different activities that actually lead to the discoveries. Most of it's been from work activities, very few of them for sports and leisure activities. But I am expecting that this incidence of discoveries will increase from the leisure sector. If you think that we're opening up our rivers and our lakes to more sort of outdoor water sports, greenways, blueways, so on, especially since COVID, people seem to have found rediscovered a new passion for the great outdoors and all the activities involved in that. Out of the work end of things, only a small portion of it is from actual archaeological work. So a lot of it is from other sort of sectors that are involved in rivers or close to these sort of environments. So if you think of it, that we normally consider that archaeological work is going to be the manner in which all our great discoveries actually occur. It's actually found only a very, very small proportion of it. So perhaps it's something we as archaeologists should pay attention to in the future in terms of who or what sectors so we actually sort of approach and bring on board, even in terms of partnership. In terms of the slide over to the right, it's in human activity that got river dredging is by most the prevalent form of discovery of dugout boats, turf cutting to a lesser extent, and then lake drainage. The turf cutting, excuse me, the turf cutting, I'm expecting a significant sort of fall off in terms of those discoveries with the derogations on peat extraction, from the European regulations. We even got instances of body searches there as well, turned up some of these boats in the past. Concerning archaeological work, 9 boats have been found through underwater archaeological survey, 11 of them through underwater archaeological excavation, and just 10 from dryland excavation. Most notably, 2 boats turned up in 2012 and 2013 in the Drumclay Crannog excavation, in Fermanagh. So in terms of, again, the watch period, we'd be really looking at the February to April sort of periods, and again, June through to November seem to be the particular periods that we actually have the higher incidence of these sort of discoveries. It tends to suggest that we're looking at seasonal sort of weather sort of events, but the data that we've actually been looking at so far shows a greater amount of them have come from human activity. So I was talking about those there. We wonder how accurate, kind of predictions be, based on the data that we have available. If you bear in mind that there's approximately 500 boats been found on the island of Ireland, and we're getting diminishing levels of data as we sort of drill down further into the information. But the river dredging would suggest that we're getting more of them coming up from the actual rivers, but it's actually the opposite is the case. From our records, we know that 66% of the boats have been found in lakes, and just 29% in the rivers, and the remaining in smaller sort of mixed sort of environments. So really the point that comes down to it is that the more data that's actually collected at the time of discovery and recording of these boats, including the incidences and circumstances, some more accurate we can be in terms of sort of assessing what sort of events, activities, whether they're human, whether they're weather, that will actually sort of generate better sort of discoveries, and maybe we can sort of involve sort of stakeholders and so on to be able to sort of assist in recording of the boats. Carl Brady in his paper there yesterday just very succinctly said about the limited resources that are available. And it's not just to the Republic of Ireland, but it's all national monuments jurisdictions. I think globally, really, that we're fighting over very limited sort of pot of resources, and it's what and how we can actually manage, that with the incidences of discoveries as well. So I think it's an important consideration. So very briefly, just in terms of the classifications of boats, there's a wide variety of functions, as you can imagine. I'm sort of teaching, I think, the audience here how to suck eggs here, really, when you consider that. When we look at boating in general, it's a trade-off in terms of boat design. It equates with the actual sort of function of them. So if we're going to be looking for to build a cargo boat, we're not going to be bringing in qualities of speed, for example, or vice versa as well. And it's a trade-off on design. Dugout boats are exactly the same as well. If you can imagine any type of work, activity, function for any sort of boat, dugout boats actually have them as well. I think the only one exception might be pleasure boats. I don't know, maybe they use them for fun as well. Traditional sort of methodologies, I've looked at the design, size, shape. They've actually looked also at looking at the shape and classifying the shape of the hull. based on how it looks similar to a modern sort of boat, and that can actually end up sort of causing misinterpretations and limiting our ability to be able to sort of assess, what these boats were used for. Equally as well, when we do look at some of these boats, we're actually try to lump every sort of consideration we can and how we consider them. So, for example, if we look at a Dugout cargo boat, I think it's very apt to look at load-bearing capacities, internal volume of space, and so on. But if we're looking at a passenger ferry, it might be misleading to be able to assess it for full load when we're actually looking at how many people it can accommodate, rather than actually, that sort of load. So, thankfully, it's becoming a more sort of nuanced approach in more recent years. And we look at sort of dugout boats that actually are very fluid sort of hull design. And this is one of the reasons why it's very difficult to create a classification or a typological sort of sequence of them. Because if you consider that standard boats, if you like, say the plank-built ones, that they're composed of the elements of a keel, ribs, creating the frame, creating the hull shape. The planking forms the skin that causes it to float and behave like a boat. It's a very sort of rigid set of parameters, and if you vary beyond how these things are married together, it no longer functions properly as a boat. Dugout boats, the frame and the skin are one and the same, so they're very fluid in the nature of how they're carved. So it's much more nuanced in terms of how we should be approaching looking at their interpretation. So again, the whole design and the environment of use very much is the determining sort of factor of what they were actually used for and how we interpret them. There seems to be some emerging regional variations in their design, but again, it's just the records over the years haven't been that good, but we are improving in terms of the data that we do collect. When we do collect the data, quite often it's at a one-time collection, because it's a factor of costs. We have limited resources, we've got a limited sort of budget, and it's in an enviable sort of position that monument services globally are in terms of what do they do with these otherwise unwieldy objects that if they take them into their own custody, they have to manage them effectively, and how do they do that with no money? So perhaps it's deposition in situ back into the river or the lake. Unfortunately, there are instances where they're left on the river bank or the lake bank. So it's the one opportunity to be able to record, so it's very important we do it at that one particular time. In terms of recent discoveries, I'm just going to take four examples. The first one is the River Finn and River Foyle discoveries. So remember, in November 2015, there was that significant sort of flood event. It turned up 8 boats at Claddy and another boat on further downriver on the Foyle at Lifford. The farmer whose land that the 8 boats magically appeared described it as quite a catastrophic event. That along that section of the river, there's a river levee, and they're used to the annual sort of floods that actually sort of occur there. This is just Claddy is just here, and Lifford is the other location where they turned the one boat there. And he described it as a bomb going off, that the water pressure burst the levee bank, brought up debris material from the river and scattered it over a 400 square metre area. So it was Andy Sides from the local agency went along to examine it and recognised that there was fragments of dugout boats there, and called Ronan McHugh there in the Department for Communities to go along and examine and collect them. There's been a total of 31 boats found from this stretch of the river between St Johnson, 4 of them here in the north. There's the 9 now at Claddy, and then the remaining grouping there in Lifford, Strabane. And this place always keeps on giving. Rory McNeary is in the audience here as well. He recorded one of the boats in 2010 when it turned up. So in terms of how the river normally sort of looks, this is a very useful sort of site there. Floodmaps.ie is very, very useful in terms of the information that it gives. This is the river in its normal situation, and here it is in its flood sort of aspect. So the darker blue there is the normal sort of flood sort of considerations. So it's quite extensive. So these are the remains of the boat that brought up at the Claddy explosion. So it's 18 fragments, and we were able to determine that there were 9 boats from them. So it's a matter of jigsaw pieces, just trying to piece them together, separate them out, looking at them on their timber sort of qualities, and then bringing them back together and marrying them into the various parts where they should be. So the Department for Communities believed they had the remains of 2 boats, but it turned out to be 9 boats in all. Again, another sort of flood event, or at least elevated water levels in March or April of this year turned up 2 more boats, and these are Lifford, Strabane. These are members of the Department for Communities that are doing a photogrammetric recording of them. And last Tuesday, I got I sent this photograph there from the same stretch of the river. So it's a part of the river that keeps on giving and seems to just catch the boats from drifting further downstream and brings them back up onto the riverbank at the shallows, there. So I'm going to be up there now Friday or Monday week examining the boats, and they're apparently there's a sighting of another one in the actual sort of river. So we'll be doing a drone fly over to see if we can relocate that and take care of that. So I'll be back up visiting there. And Rex Bangerter, I can never pronounce his surname properly, from ADCO, he's recently found 2 boats on the Donegal side, the Republic of Ireland sort of side of the river as well, so we'll be doing some work up there. So it'll be very interesting engaging with him and seeing what comes up. But I want to draw your attention to 3 of these boats in particular. This one here, 412, 419 and 417. While these boats were quite sort of fragmentary, we actually turned up sort of new sort of data from them. We have a footrest feature on the port stern here on this particular one, this boat 412, and a footrest feature over here as well, and a rowing footrest on the bottom of this one. On 417, there's a footrest again here, and we have a thole pin for rowing on the bow end. So these footrests are on the sterns, and we're actually just trying to figure out what they refer for, because normally when we have footrests associated with rowing dugout boats, they tend to be midships, and certainly not in the bow, perhaps maybe more near towards the stern end. But when we're getting them right mounted in the port quarter, it just didn't make sort of sense. And we started thinking perhaps they're actually punting footrests, because we've never actually come across this sort of feature before in terms, or at least if we have come across it, it hasn't been appropriately sort of recorded for us to be able to, speculate on it. So I was quite comfortable that it was a eureka moment in terms of we had this new propulsion technique, and that these are cargo boats in which they were propelled or punted and steered from the stern with the punting pole and rowed from near the bow, and perhaps even the oarsman sort of sitting on the cargo. So the footrest features, you have the thole pins on the gunnels, but there's no indication of seat emplacements. So 2 of the boats I turned up there in April, May, had these features here as well. That's one there now, you can see the footrest is over here, and there's a second one actually over on this side here as well. The top row are some of the new discoveries, which we have the footrest here and here for the punting position, punting positions here, punting position there, and we have a bow end rowing position at this specific location here, and they have a footrest here for bow end sort of rowing, but another sort of feature here which seems to be punting footrest. So this is completely sort of new, and I went back and had a look at the old sort of records to see if we had any indication of these actually surviving. And went the wrong way there. And these are 2 of them that I pulled up from the old sort of records. Made inquiries with my colleagues internationally to see if they'd come across any incidences of this, and they actually hadn't. So I was quite happy with it and comfortable with the interpretation, and this is an artist sort of drawing of how it may have looked. Then a couple of years later I came across this little video footage here that was put up by Enniskillen Museum, and this is of a Loch Earn cot, which is in the same region of Northern Ireland, and the cots are plank-built descendants of the dugout boats, albeit that they do morph into sort of a wider sort of beam as well. And here we have, right at the bow, 2 people rowing, or 1 person rowing, is it, and a fella at the stern with this punting pole as well. So it's just a bit of a very, very happy moment to be able to sort of discover this. I think I have to speed up, thank you, Dorina. In the River Boyne, we had another sort of weather event. This was in April, May 2021. We had some spring tides activities, but also we had a drop off in the rainfall as well. It led to abnormally low water levels in the tidal sort of section of the river. So there was a fellow, Anthony Murphy from Mythical Ireland, who was flying his drone to see if he could actually relocate or find a dolphin that was reported swimming the river, and he came across the series of dugout boats. So, and he had sufficient sort of knowledge of archaeology to be able to know and recognise them for what they were. So, no, there were more than 10 boats, but the records they actually have are for these 10. So the blue dots are the previous sort of discoveries, and we've got a grouping here, which was the areas that were found by the actual drone. These ones here are the top ones that we actually sort of found, and I'm only talking about 3 of them because it was new sort of discovery again. This one's the best one to give an example of from Rathmullen, that had a very sort of flat sort of base with the thicker sort of shelf-like ends, and these little sort of bevels to be able to sort of hold whatever material may have been in place. Very square-shaped external sort of hull, so we're able to know and looking, assessing the nuances of the boat, that this was a workboat. It was designed for a local sort of use because it wouldn't have been able to travel sort of very, very far. It wasn't very efficient at its external hull sort of size, and it seemed to be much more focused on the internal sort of space. So we're speculating then, that this is quite possibly for fishing sort of boats, especially the way they were sort of grouped together. A number of these had holes coming through angled up, so there was actually something being held, 2-3 centimetre diameter sort of holes, and again here as well, in terms of something being suspended. So we're speculating is it a lantern sort of for night fishing. So we were quite happy that it was a working sort of boat, that the internal sort of midship section was actually used to hold fish and so on, and that the either end of the race area was the operation sort of area for the fisherman. And just by coincidence, Anthony Murphy came across Facebook video footage of a fella, and I believe he was over in Cambodia or Vietnam, and going the wrong way again. And here he is. This is a plank boat, but again, it's very slender, possibly a descendant of Dugout boat, but he's actually holding the fish, catching the fish, and keeping them alive in this space here while he's working on the stern. And an artist's impression by Ray Long again of what Drogheda may have looked like in the medieval period with these boats. River Shannon, I had opportunity to have access to the data. It was very excellent archaeological sort of records. Professor Aidan O'Sullivan did this excavation, and some members here were participating in Carl Brady, Neil Brady, Finbar Moore were part of that. I managed to get access to the records there only last year, but it's quite exciting, the preliminary sort of results, that there are 10 boats. They thought they had 11, but it's actually 10 boats. We're able to break it down based on the hull design of each of these boats. It seems that 2 of the boats were possibly deliberately built to build the medieval bridge that Aidan O'Sullivan excavated. There were 4 passenger ferries. 3 of them were seconded as to bridge building activities for the bridge, and then there's a possible medieval dock off to one side in which we had a cargo boat and a swift boat. So maybe something that was of a militaristic or quasi-militaristic sort of function. So there might be sort of control of trade on the river. The 2 there were off to one side. But this is early days in terms of our data crunching on this. But interesting enough, that the dugout boats there, that they're passenger ferries, but they are double oars, rowing positions on them, whereas normal sort of passenger ferries that were very well recorded in the north had a single one. Well, just really quickly then, Drumclane Crannog excavation in 2012-2013. Phenomenal amount of data has come up from this. This is excavated in advance of the Enniskillen sort of bypass. It was on the very close to Lower Loch Earn, and it was recorded as being in a small sort of lake off to one side from the from Ireland's fourth largest lake, being Lower Lough Erne, and not having a navigable connection through. But we did an experimental project making a replica boat, a rowing one, and we decided to use the data from their oars. They had straight-bladed oars and oars that are offset by 10 degrees. And we didn't know which is which, and we thought maybe that if you're rowing a dugout boat, you're very confined, that you're rowing something like this, that if you had an offset oar on this side and straight blade on this side, that the blades of the oars were in the water at the right angle. So we thought that was actually what was actually going on. These had both of these types of oars from the excavation. This is a stump of a straight bladed one. This is one that's offset by 10 degrees. It's not very clear in that photograph, but it's offset by that amount. And here we have a cast off or a rough out. That was obviously some sort of damage occurred, and these were used up in the bulking up to make up the crown. So we have Michael here and Pat here making the oars, and came up with the straight blade and the ones that are offset by 10 degrees. But we actually found, because dugout boats ride so low in the water, straight bladed ones can't actually lift them out of the water on the backstroke. So that's why they're offset by 10 degrees. So we're able to say about the significant sort of connotations from that excavation, that the socioeconomic implications from the oars alone of that current shows that it had a navigable outlet into Lough Erne. It was far more significant in terms of socioeconomic sort of implications, that it didn't just have dugout boats, but it had other types of boats there as well, even though the other boats don't survive in the record. So, final slide. In terms of emerging patterns and future prospects, with changing sort of climate and weather events, and certainly expecting that there's going to be an increasing propensity for discoveries of boats. That includes further sort of cycles of river dredging if they're talking about the OPW doing this as flood alleviation sort of schemes. And these human activities, in that sort of dredging certainly occur, less so obviously on the turf cutting, but I expect a lot more to happen during these seasonal cycles through leisure pursuits on our freshwater environments. But it's so important to be able to gather and collate sort of the data and be able to sort of promote that awareness. As Carl Brady sort of said, it's an enviable position in terms of the resources that we actually sort of have, and quite often we have to leave them in situ. And that can at times leave a poor taste in the communities' mouths if they see that we're depositing there or we're leaving them on the riverbank, that we don't care about them, which couldn't be further from the truth. We just don't have the resources. So I think maybe we should have to rethink in terms of what we do and how we actually manage them. And quite often they're a one-time recording, and we should be looking to see what we can do in terms of radiocarbon dating there on site. We have legislation that we have to apply, and correctly so, in terms of the processes for to be able to tamper with artifacts, to take the samples to record them, but perhaps these can be streamlined if we're actually leaving them on the riverbank, because Archaeology 101 is to go away from the site with a date, and if we don't have these ones dated, we're losing a lot of valuable data. So finally, I've been happy to say that I've been in discussions there with the Historic Environment Division for the Department of Communities Northern Ireland, and we're talking aspirationally at this stage at least in terms of what we can do in managing the boats from discovery through to deposition or safe storage. We can use these things as training opportunities for archaeologists as well. Like in Monday week now, there'll be a team of archaeologists be assembled, and we'll be able to train them on how to record these sort of boats. So it isn't just the few archaeologists, but it's the wider archaeological community that can actually be involved in that. But we can possibly extend it out to other stakeholders like fishing clubs and so on, that have a pride of location as well. And even that they could actually have curatorship or in terms of minding and monitoring wherever the boats are deposited as well, to make sure that they're safeguarded. And again, radiocarbon dating I think is so important. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Niall. A lot of information. But I suppose back to the theme of the conference, human activity, extreme flooding events, extreme drought events, all adding to the, well, you're getting new boats to look at, but it's still affecting the archaeology right around the country and the inland as well as the coast. We're kind of be focused on the coast more, I think, but obviously it shows a huge amount going on, dynamic environment inland as well now with the changes in climate. Any questions from the
I was just wondering, I missed Carl's lecture yesterday, and I was just wondering, is there any evidence to suggest that any of the discoveries were sunk deliberately, perhaps as a form of ritual deposition, as you would have had with various weapons and so forth?
Yeah, it's a very good question. What we find is archaeologists are very, very shy of actually sort of saying ritual significance or ritual connotations, because that's a catch-all, historically, for our meaning. We don't know. But yeah, there has been instances of that. One that comes to mind in terms of ritual use, if you like, even not even going on to the deposition side of it yet, is over in Scotland in the lowlands where there's the Loch Arthur dugout boat. I think it was like a 12-metre long boat as far as I remember, but with a zoomorphic bow head carved out the solid in it, It's in a small lake with a crown oak or one or two crown oaks. It was never had a navigable outlet. It wasn't going to go anywhere. This massive boat in this small lake had to have been used for some sort of ritualistic sort of connotations on that. So we can say, quite comfortably that did occur there. In terms of deposition, Carl has some boats there from the Loch Carb, discovery from a few years ago with Captain Trevor Northridge as well, and the great work he did there and the follow-up work by the Underwater Archaeology Unit. And one of their boats, which I think Carl might be better positioned to be able to talk about it, but Pat Tanner is also doing assessments on some of the work there. And I did have the opportunity to discuss briefly one of these sort of boats, and to my mind it was constructed in a manner that was designed to float, not float very well, but wouldn't have been a great performer in terms of any one function or design sort of purpose, and sapwood up on top of the gunwale sort of level, very thick sides and base as well. So very much not what you would do. It was like a boat waiting to be finished, although it was very finely sort of finished. So to my mind, that was possibly designed as a one-off sort of use, or very few sort of events, and perhaps just that. But it's the only one that I can think of to mind. There are boats that were deliberately scuttled when they were unfinished, because keep them in the water, it keeps the oak fresh and pliable and be able to take it back out and work again at your leisure.
Thank you.